History is full of turning points, moments when the fate of entire civilizations hangs in the balance, and the world as people know it is forever changed. In the story of ancient Greece, few moments were as pivotal as the rise of Philip II of Macedon, a man whose ambition and vision would reshape the Greek world and set the stage for an empire that would stretch far beyond its borders. The Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC was one of those defining moments, a clash not just of armies but of ideas, destinies, and the very future of Greece itself. On that fateful day, the hopes and fears of generations came to a head, and the outcome would echo through history. For centuries before this, Greece was a patchwork of proud, fiercely independent city-states: Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Corinth, and many more. Each city-state or polis had its own government, traditions, and ambitions. They were bound together by language and religion, yet divided by rivalries, jealousies, and the constant struggle for power. These city-states fought epic wars, forged shifting alliances, and competed in everything from politics to philosophy to the Olympic Games. Yet, despite their brilliance, they could rarely unite for long. Each was master of its own fate, and the idea of a single ruler over all of Greece seemed unthinkable. To the north, beyond the mountains, lay Macedonia, a land of rugged hills and wild frontiers. For generations, the sophisticated Greeks looked down on the Macedonians, dismissing them as uncultured outsiders, barely more than barbarians at the edge of the Greek world. But everything changed when Philip II ascended the throne in 359 BC. Philip was no ordinary king. He was a man of extraordinary vision, cunning, and determination, who saw not just what Macedonia was, but what it could become. Philip was a visionary and a military genius, blending the best of Greek culture with the fierce spirit of his own people. He was determined to transform Macedonia from a backwater kingdom into a force to be reckoned with. As a young man, Philip had been sent as a hostage to Thebes, one of Greece's most powerful cities. There, he absorbed the lessons of Greek politics, diplomacy, and above all, warfare. He studied the tactics of the Theban generals, learned the art of negotiation, and saw firsthand the strengths and weaknesses of the Greek world. Returning to Macedonia, Philip set about unifying his fractured kingdom. He reformed the Macedonian army, introducing the deadly phalanx formation and equipping his soldiers with longer spears and better armor. With discipline and innovation, he forged a military machine unlike any Greece had seen before, and began expanding his influence southward, city by city. The Greeks, especially the citizens of Athens, watched Philip's rise with growing alarm. They saw the Macedonian king not as a liberator but as a looming threat to their cherished independence and way of life. Athens, the proud champion of democracy and freedom, viewed Philip as a tyrant, an ambitious monarch who threatened to crush the liberties of the Greek people under his heel. Among the Athenians, none was more vocal than Demosthenes, the city's greatest orator. With fiery speeches, he warned his fellow Greeks of the Macedonian menace, urging them to set aside their differences and unite before it was too late. His words echoed through the assembly halls and marketplaces, stirring both hope and fear. Meanwhile, Philip was a master of more than just war. He used diplomacy, bribery, and cunning to play the city-states against each other, exploiting old rivalries and forging alliances when it suited him. He understood that the divisions among the Greeks were his greatest weapon. But as Philip's power grew, his ambitions became too obvious to ignore. The city-states, once content to quarrel among themselves, began to realize that their freedom was slipping away, and that only unity could save them. When Philip marched his armies into central Greece, the old enemies Athens and Thebes set aside their bitter history. In a rare moment of unity, they formed an alliance, determined to resist the Macedonian advance and defend the legacy of Greek independence. The final confrontation was now inevitable. On the plains near Chaeronea, the armies of Greece and Macedonia gathered, each side knowing that the outcome would shape the destiny of the entire region. As the sun set over the battlefield, the fate of Greece hung in the balance. The choices made in these moments would echo for centuries, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. The alliance between Athens and Thebes was nothing short of extraordinary, a moment that would shape the fate of Greece for generations to come. For centuries, these two powerful city-states had been fierce competitors, their histories marked by conflict and rivalry. Yet in the face of a looming threat from the north, they found common ground and set aside their differences. Once bitter rivals, Athens and Thebes now stood shoulder to shoulder, united by a shared determination to defend their homeland. The urgency of the Macedonian advance forced them to look beyond old grudges and focus on the survival of Greek freedom. The famed orator Demosthenes played a pivotal role in forging this alliance. He journeyed to Thebes where he delivered a passionate and persuasive speech, warning of the dangers posed by Philip of Macedon. His words resonated deeply, convincing the Thebans to join forces with Athens in a last stand for liberty. Inspired by this newfound unity, other Greek city-states soon rallied to the cause. A coalition was formed, bringing together warriors from across the land, all determined to halt the relentless Macedonian advance and preserve their way of life. The combined army was formidable. Athens contributed its vast wealth, resources, and sheer numbers of citizen soldiers, ready to defend their city's honor and independence. Thebes, meanwhile, brought its legendary military prowess to the alliance, including the elite Sacred Band, an elite corps of warriors renowned for their discipline, bravery, and unbreakable bonds. Yet beneath the surface, the alliance was fragile. Old suspicions and tensions simmered, threatening to undermine their unity at the worst possible moment. Command was divided, with generals from different cities often disagreeing on strategy. The ghosts of past rivalries lingered, making true cooperation difficult. Their tactics, rooted in centuries-old traditions, had not kept pace with the innovations of their Macedonian adversaries. The Greeks clung to the familiar, even as the world around them changed. They placed their faith in the classic hoplite phalanx, believing that courage, discipline, and unity would be enough to secure victory, just as it had in generations past. But they underestimated Philip and the revolutionary army he had built. The stage was set for a clash that would decide the future of Greece. Philip II didn't just conquer, he transformed warfare. He built a professional army centered on the Macedonian phalanx, armed with the sarissa, a spear twice as long as the Greek hoplites. This bristling wall of spear points was nearly impenetrable. Philip drilled his men relentlessly, making them flexible and disciplined. He combined this infantry corps with the elite companion cavalry, noble horsemen trained to strike at the enemy's flanks and rear. He also invested in siege technology and light infantry, creating a complete, adaptable military system. The Greek army at Chaeronea was a relic of the past. The Macedonian army was the future, and it was about to prove its superiority. On the day of battle, Philip was not alone. At his side was his 18-year-old son, Alexander, soon to be known as the Great. Philip entrusted Alexander with command of the companion cavalry, the elite force meant to deliver the decisive blow. This was no ceremonial post. Alexander's charge would decide the battle. He had been trained for this moment, by Aristotle in philosophy, and by his father in war. The soldiers admired him for his skill and leadership. For Alexander, this was his chance to prove himself, to step out of his father's shadow. The fate of the battle, and perhaps the kingdom, rested on his shoulders. On a fateful morning in August 338 BC, two mighty armies gathered on the broad plain near Chaeronea. The air was thick with anticipation, as the sun rose over the hills, casting long shadows across the land that would soon be stained by history. The Greek coalition, a fragile alliance of city-states, took up a formidable defensive position. The Athenians, proud and resolute, anchored the left flank, while the Thebans, famed for their elite Sacred Band, held the right. Their shields gleamed in the morning light, a symbol of unity in the face of a common threat. Opposite them stood the Macedonian army, led by King Philip II, a master tactician. He commanded the right, directly opposing the Athenians. On the Macedonian left, his young son Alexander, just 18 but already a legend in the making, faced the Thebans. The tension between the two sides was palpable, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Suddenly, the silence shattered. With a roar, both armies surged forward. The ground trembled as thousands of spears and shields crashed together, the two great phalanxes colliding in a brutal contest of strength and discipline. The clangor of bronze echoed across the plain. For hours, neither side gave ground. The lines held firm, each soldier locked in a desperate struggle for survival. Sweat and dust mingled as the sun climbed higher, and the outcome remained uncertain. The Greeks fought with unmatched courage, especially the Athenians, who pressed forward with renewed vigor. Their commanders urged them on, convinced that victory was within their grasp. The clash of shields and the cries of warriors filled the air as hope surged through the Greek ranks. Yet behind the chaos, Philip was watching closely. He was not just a warrior but a strategist, and he had a plan that would change the course of the battle. As the Athenians advanced, the Macedonian right began to fall back in perfect order. Not from fear, but by design. It was a calculated move, drawing the enemy in and stretching their lines thin. The Athenians, sensing an opportunity, surged ahead. In their eagerness, they lost their tight formation, creating a dangerous gap between themselves and the Thebans. The Macedonian trap was nearly sprung. In that moment, the fate of Greece hung in the balance. The next moves would decide not just the outcome of the battle, but the destiny of an entire civilization. Philip's genius was in his timing. As the Athenians pressed forward, he ordered a feigned retreat, drawing them out, breaking their formation, and opening a gap in the Greek line. The Thebans, still locked in combat, could only watch as their allies were lured away. The Greek army was now split, its unity shattered. Philip saw his moment. He gave the signal. It was time for Alexander and the companion cavalry to strike. All the planning, all the discipline, had led to this decisive moment. At his father's signal, Alexander led the companion cavalry in a disciplined, thunderous charge straight into the gap. The Greeks, caught off guard, couldn't reform their lines. The cavalry smashed into the exposed flank and rear, hitting the Athenians and sweeping behind the Thebans. The Theban sacred band, surrounded, fought to the last man, true to their oath. But the rest of the Greek army broke and fled. The Macedonian phalanx advanced, turning retreat into rout. The victory was total. Thousands of Greeks were killed or captured. The Theban army was destroyed. On the fields of Chaeronea, Macedonian supremacy was established. The age of the independent city-state was over. A new era had begun. In victory, Philip was shrewd. He spared Athens, seeking their cooperation for future plans, but punished Thebes harshly as a warning. With resistance crushed, Philip summoned Greek leaders to Corinth and formed the League of Corinth. On the surface, the League preserved autonomy, but Philip was its undisputed leader. He imposed peace and outlawed wars between members, ending centuries of conflict, but at the cost of independence. The city-states were now part of a unified Greece, controlled by Macedonia. The era of the Free Polis was over. A new unified Greece had been forged by Macedonian steel. The Battle of Chaeronea changed history. Philip unified Greece for the first time, creating the foundation for his ultimate goal, a war against Persia. The League of Corinth provided the army and legitimacy for this campaign. But Philip was assassinated before he could begin. His son Alexander inherited the army and the dream. Alexander would use the unity and military machine forged at Chaeronea to conquer the Persian Empire and spread Greek culture across the world. The battle ended the Classical Age and began the Hellenistic era, a new chapter in world history, born on a dusty plain in 338 BC.